All right, welcome back. This is episode 2 of chapter 2. And I'm going to start off with the one way to approach research and methods that we didn't talk about last time, and that is critical sociology. So we did scientific, we did interpretive, and now we're doing critical. And of course, there's our famous bearded friend, Karl Marx. Every sociologist steeped deep in the Marx. So critical sociology, the study of society that focus on the need for social change, right? And critical sociologists ask moral and political questions. And I think a great one of those questions as we look at our society or our culture is, how does society work, first of all, and should it exist in its present form? I mean, let's look at something like pay for people who identify as the gender female. We know that that's what, still 73 cents or so, 77 cents to what every dollar that a person or a man makes, person who identifies as gender male. So first, how does it work? Well, women knowingly get paid less for the same degree, the same job, same experience. Second question, should it exist in its present form? Oh, okay, I see. No, what are we going to do about that? And that's what sociologists who are doing critical sociology are asking and are then leading themselves to. So they reject sort of Weber's goal that sociology should be value free, because it's like, how can we be value free? I mean, I feel this way about this, so how can I really just scrap that and not somehow let that come in to what I'm studying or the way that I'm approaching research? Critical sociology emphasizes that sociologists should be activists in pursuit of greater social equality. And of course, I know that we hear the word activist now, and over the last 20 years or so, people have really tried to program and reprogram that into having a bad or negative connotation. But that's how children stopped working in factories. That's how we got the Republican-led administration to create the EPA and all these different things that helped our environment. This is how we get to now, right? Activism is an important part of how a democracy works. And without it, we just wouldn't see the changes that have been so important, especially in regards to civil rights. So from sociological perspective, I encourage us to think of activist sociology in a really positive and interesting and exciting way. So critical sociologists seek to change society and the character of research. They identify personally with their research subjects, and with subjects, they use their findings to provide a voice for less powerful people. They don't have the time, the resources, the money, whatever it is to do that. Then I'm going to look at what's impacting this community or these people, and I'm going to be the voice for those people. We'll let those people tell it, but then the way that I do the research and then the way that I put that research out there is going to be a positive and make a positive impact. And of course, I think critical sociology advances the goal. And I don't think it's political. Some people would say that, but that doesn't seem correct to me in so many ways, of a more equal society. That is what we have promised. That's what the folks who set up this country said was going to be our founding principles. So that's just what we consistently strive for in this country. Again, we could call it a political goal to make things more equal, but that is also just the number one driving directive since day one, at least in theory, at least for what we say. So let's make things with critical sociology more equal through our research. So here's the three different ones right here: positivist, interpretive, and critical. Positivist lines up with structural functional approach. Interpretive sociology lines up with a symbolic interactionist paradigm or approach. And critical sociology, obviously, the social conflict approach, looks at inequality and how can we actively go about changing that with the work that we're doing. All right. Again, each of the three ways that I've said we can do sociology stand closer to one of our theoretical approaches that we talked about in chapter 1. Scientific or positivist, structural functionalist, interpretive, symbolic interactionist, and critical linked to social conflict. I have them here in different colors. Sometimes people are really visual learners and that helps, but just so that you know that they match up, okay? So be curious and ask questions. Go ahead, take a couple minutes and write down a list of questions. So like just, I have things that you observed here, but every day you observe behavior. Think about the last time you were out someplace or even watching the news or whatever it might be, and write down a list of questions about the behavior that you witnessed or that you observed, right? Like things that you want to know, things that you want to know more about, things that you want to know more about that would help other people understand, human behavior. And forget about the things that you think you know might be the answers to these, and just write down as many questions come to mind. All right, so was what you observed interesting? What was interesting about it? What questions could you ask to get to the meaning of the behavior that you witnessed? So you witnessed the behavior. Now, how do we understand it better? How do we find out the dynamics behind that and what that means to individuals and groups of people? All right, let's look at ethics and methods of doing research. Now, before we look at the ways to collect data, look, the way that we collect data must be ethical. We must cultivate an awareness that research can harm people as well as help subjects in community, right? So we've got these guidelines established by the American Sociological Association, and that's formal guidelines for how we conduct research and what kind of ethics we should have when doing it. So sociologists must be skillful and fair-minded, right? We try and avoid coming to that final conclusion right away. We have to disclose all of our research findings. We have to make the results available to other sociologists so that they can build on it with their research. And we have to ensure that subjects are not harmed, okay? We have to be able to stop work right away if the subject is at risk of harm. Think about if you're doing something or doing some research on domestic abuse. You have to make sure the way that you do that is private enough to where you're not conducting an interview at this person's home and then the abuser shows up, right? So if that's the case, then of course you've got to stop that work right away. Mostly that wouldn't be the case, but we have to understand the dynamics of the research that we're doing and the topics that we're interested in. Obviously, we have to protect the privacy of the individuals. We have to get an informed consent form. If we're going to be doing interviews, that they understand that we won't use this for anything else except for our research and the paper. And another one is you've got to publish and include all your sources of financial support. I mean, if McDonald's is like, clearly we have looked into this and we're not deforesting the rainforest at too much of a rate and paid for by McDonald's. I mean, we're not really going to trust that research if that happens to be the case. And never take money from an organization that seeks to influence your research. That happens all the time. We need to talk about ethics in a big way because we're experiencing a massive lack of ethics when it comes to publishing scholarly documents and research and things like that. So we want to be on the right side of that and do it ethically. You also have to have an institutional review board that ensures that your research will not violate ethical standards. That's if you're going further into the research thing past sort of what we'll be doing this semester. Before beginning work in another country, be familiar with that society. Understand what people are likely to regard as a violation of privacy. In some countries, you don't just shake somebody's hand and get in their personal space. Touching someone from certain places in the Middle East is a sign of disrespect, particularly if they identify with the gender female. So you've got to understand that. What would they think is a violation of your privacy? What would they regard as a source of danger, right? The same rules apply in the United States to studying diverse people and studying people within a different culture. That leads us back time and time again this semester to cultural pluralism. You got to make every attempt to know and understand the people that you'll be observing and that you'll be researching to increase your level of understanding. Because if you're going to write about something that's important about another culture or observing things that you've collected and through interpretive sociology, we just have to make sure that you come into it with knowledge that would be appropriate, right? All right, a lot of different ways to do research. Asking questions or to do a survey is certainly one of them. That's a research method in which subjects respond to a series of statements or questions. You can do a questionnaire. You've probably done that really quickly. You could also do an interview as a different way to do it. And certainly it targets some type of population. Oh, a political party, college students living in Colorado, something like that. And researchers usually study a sample. So that's going to be a much smaller number of subjects selected to represent that entire sort of population. And I talked about that in the last lecture. Maybe as few as 1,500 people can commonly give a somewhat accurate estimate of public opinion for the whole country. Of course, you've got to do much larger, much broader surveys. You've got to follow that up with in-depth interviews if you really want to get even more details and an even more accurate estimate of public opinion or how people feel, and then how they're likely to behave. Survey must have a specific plan for asking questions. One of those plans, the most common one, is a questionnaire, just a series of written statements or questions. And depending on how you write this questionnaire, it could be really fast or it could take a while. So close-ended questions, easy for this type of things. Fixed responses, yes or no, how much, 1 through 5. And they're going to be something that you choose. And of course, something that could be distorted. People could read into your answers and change them from what they think others might answer. But it's a good neutral way to have yes or no, fixed type of things, questions. And then, of course, open-ended, much different. People can respond much more freely. It's a lot more time-consuming. A lot of surveys now or questionnaires are meant to be finished in a minute or 2 minutes, or people just simply won't take them. They won't do them, right? Because it takes too much of their time. But when you sit down in an interview, it's different. Do you feel this way, yes or no? Why did you feel that way, right? Wow, well, that's going to take a while for a person to explain their experiences. So doing a questionnaire overall can save time, expense. It targets a specific part of the population, and it's certainly the most widely used. And then you could have, if you're doing a questionnaire, 5 or 6 questions that are close-ended, and then just a couple that are maybe open-ended that then give you a lot more detail and depth to what you're studying. Look under your seats. Oprah's got all sorts of stuff for you. It's not a free car, and probably not free canvas either. Interview. That's something that I would love for us to do this semester, particularly with our food paper. And that's where a researcher personally asks subjects a series of questions. And subjects are the people we're interviewing, right? Open-ended questions allow for longer but more detailed answers. But that's where we're really going to get into interpretive and qualitative sociology. What does love mean to you? What does being married mean to you? What does being a mother or father mean to you? And that gives the participants the freedom to respond as they want to. You could ask follow-up questions then that you either have or there's something that interests you in the moment, and then that takes you into a place that you maybe didn't expect before. So that's fantastic because it's not like you're planning out the whole thing if you kind of piggyback on something or a question that you were looking at that then leads you down another interesting path. It's personal. A lot of times it's face-to-face. It allows for more interpersonal contact. Empathy is a huge part of that. Understanding is a huge part of that. And I think it can encourage a level of openness that you're not going to find in a questionnaire when people are just trying to get it done, right? Or other forms maybe that are more distant of research gathering. So interviews, something we can do this semester that we will be doing and that I think are a great way to collect data. When we're asking questions in an interview, though, we've got to be mindful not to sort of force a yes or no question or lead people down a road. You know how kind of asking a question a certain way, you could get the answer that you want, right? You feel this way about this, don't you? But we want to treat all subjects the same way, and we want to have them sort of naturally draw out the responses, right? We don't want them to be hurried, looking at our watches while we're doing the interview. And yeah, it can be difficult tracking people down, trying to make a time and a place when people text you 5 minutes before you're supposed to meet them that they cancel it. But you can do it face-to-face. But look, if you interview people through an email and ask a series of questions and they're willing to type them out because they don't have the time to do it face-to-face, I think there's advantages with each type of way to do an interview. Now, we're really not going to be doing participant observation, but it's a really interesting, really awesome method that sociologists, or a way in which sociologists collect data. And participant observation is where investigators systematically observe people and join them in their routine activities. And I say routine because a wedding, a funeral, a special event, a graduation, that people aren't behaving sort of in their normal ways, right? If you really want to get to what a culture is like or what they do or how they behave around a certain piece, you do it and you get that in that routine everyday type of thing, not a special event. This uses field work to study societies, and participant observation can be more exploratory and certainly more descriptive. It doesn't have as many hard, fast rules. It gives you the flexibility you need to discover what you might not. And if you're spending a lot of time with folks, you're going to learn a lot more. Now, gaining entry is really difficult. If you're going to study gang activity, right, it's hard without disturbing the behavior of others. It might take weeks or months. Some cases it's taken years to be trusted by people that are doing that, depending on what you're researching. It can have a lot of tension and conflict as you're not part of that culture or subculture. And that means getting close while at the same time remaining an observer. Like, you got to keep some distance, even though you're sort of participating. And one of the ways that this is done sort of more dramatically is by getting a key informant, somebody that introduces you to that community. You want to do gang behavior and what it means. I mean, gangs, a lot of people just, oh, you're in a gang, that's bad. But why do people join gangs? I mean, there's an important social network piece going on there as well. And yes, of course, some things that might be less desirable, violence, whatever that might be. If you do gain entry through a key informant, boy, you've got some moral and ethical situations. I mean, what do you do when you have to observe somebody's initiation, and to get initiated, they have to shoot somebody? I mean, all of a sudden, you have a big decision to make. Do you want to collect this data, get some profound insight into people's behaviors or into a diverse culture or a subculture that people don't know a lot about? Because by listening and living with others, we have a lot to learn. But at what point does that cross a line? I mean, if you're going to be hanging out with the tribe in South America, and to get into the tribe and for them to trust you, you have to drink ayahuasca, which would be a powerful hallucinogenic drink. I mean, you'd better be okay with having something to do the next 24 or 48 hours that might be a different experience that you've never had. Now, if you do that, however, you might really be able to get in with that group of people. Then, of course, the research that you get can be much more in-depth. All right. Frame your research questions precisely and carefully. Review existing knowledge. Select an appropriate method. Not every method is going to match up with the data that you want to find out or research. Excuse me. So which of the research methods described will give the best results for the project that you're doing or what you want to know more about? Which is the most feasible for your research circumstances? Are people all over the world, so you've got to do an interview, and maybe not by email, maybe you do a Zoom meeting or an online type of face-to-face thing. I mean, that's another way that you could do it. What are your experiences? What are your budget? Are you going to travel? Are you going to buy somebody dinner and sit down and talk about something? Are you going to do a quick survey or print up 100 or 1,500 of these questionnaires? Every scenario is different, and every scenario calls for something a little bit differently from the researcher. So weigh the ethical implications. Make sure there's absence of harm, anonymity, confidentiality, written consent. Collect and analyze the data according to the research method and stick with that. Share the results, like I said. Publish them in an academic journal, a book, a newspaper, a documentary. Share it at a conference, right? Again, people need to know about the research that you're doing for it to make the impact that you hope that it will make someday. All right, that's the end of chapter 2. Now you've got chapter 1, your basics, how we do sociology. We got chapter 2, your research method and ethics. We're all ready to go with some of the basics. Cue the music. Anyway, be good people, do good things, dance, and keep moving along at your own pace. If you have any questions or concerns, reach out to me. I am here to help, and I love doing this. I can't be in the classroom this semester with you, and neither can you. So let's stay in as much contact as we can so that you are as successful as possible. That's my promise to you. All right, be good people, do good things. Peace, everybody.